Hello and welcome to the All About X-Men Comics podcast, where you'll find recaps and reviews of all the most recent X-Men comics, as well as previews for upcoming issues. Please keep in mind this will include spoilers and adult language. I'm host Scorpio Moon, a fan of all mutants, even ones like Beak and Maggot, and hosting with me is...
Johnny Alpha Point Now. I have a really big #1 over my right eye just to irritate Scorpio.
And it worked. Okay, first up this week is Uncanny X-Men number 18. The cover image of Cyclops with a gun to his head instantly captivated a lot of people, so this issue is one we've been looking forward to for a while.
The cover is very foreboding, but it's also a metaphor for Psyche's mentality in this issue. So even though there's not actually a literal gun to his head in this issue, in many ways it's a very apt description of what transpires in this comic.
So it starts right out with Scott and his new first class returning from the previous issue's training mission to discover a giant hole in their base and half the team missing. This, of course, following from the events of All New. They have plenty enough clues to piece everything together and figure out what happened, but then we kind of get into the flashbacks. And that's where we start with a very frustrated Scott screaming and punching the ground with his out-of-whack swirling power effect all over the place. They use that, by the way, to frame the panels. You know, it's always cool, at least almost always cool, when they can use something creative from the books instead of just the usual boxes. I mean, not always, because it can be kind of distracting, but I think it works here because most of this issue is pretty much a head trip anyway.
Right. This leads us right up to, like, one of the things that I'm finally happy that they hung a lantern on. Because I was always iffy about just how the conversation between Kitty and Scott went when she decided to come to the new school. And I'm glad that we finally get to see that in detail.
Yeah, we see that the first time, in fact, Kitty actually tried to kill him. Or at least kind of threatened to. So once again, you kind of do have a gun to his head, but a gun to his head kind of in the form of, you know, like when you do it when you're a kid with, like, your fingers out and your thumb, like, making a gun. You know, Kitty does that, but puts it to Scott's brain, threatening basically to unphase her fingers inside of his head and scramble his brain pan. This is where Scott starts to kind of confess a little bit and shows a little remorse or even some confusion over what happened and what he's done involving killing Xavier. And see, I told you that's all he had to do was show a little remorse about it, and then look, Kitty backed off.
She really came at him hard. And, like, he did. He opened up like a fountain, something that I've never really seen Scott do before. It's about time, and it really needed to be done in this kind of manner, so I'm really happy to see that it finally got done. I just like how it transpired. Magic just shows up and, like, hey, I'm helping a friend, drops Kitty off, and then just frickin' leaves, knowing full well that this isn't probably going to go too pretty for either of them. Like, dude, Ileana is just too awesome. You know, that just cracked me up.
Yeah, man, Magic is great. Magic is great. But, I mean, she knows that it's also something that kind of just needs to be gotten over with, because she knows it's going to happen sooner or later, one day or another. And it also, I mean, once again, kind of like hinted with Magneto in another issue, maybe some of Scott's out-of-whack powers is also psychosomatic. And all the stress and all the unresolved issues could have something to do with it. So he needs to just, you know, have this out. And, you know, it's funny, Scott uses the exact same lines as Magneto, as we'll see when we do his new #1 book, his new issue. Scott talks about his sins and how he'll pay for them someday, but first he's going to do everything he can for his people. He and Magneto, almost like word for word verbatim, have the same lines about their path in front of them.
I don't know if you call it villain or what, but I mean, he's doing his own thing, which is what Magneto needs to do, but, like, Scott is still basically on the X-Men path. He just is a little more for mutants only and not trying to help humans anymore, because he really banged it into Kitty that, dude, they got the Avengers, they got S.H.I.E.L.D., they got Fantastic Four, they got heroes coming out of their butt to save them. We need to protect our guys now. And then that's the most important thing. That's the only thing I care about right now. He's not a villain, you know what I mean? This is not an evil Scott Summers. This is just a Scott Summers on a different mission path than his previous self was privy to.
And then from there, we flash forward a little farther to see when Kitty and her team of original X-Men actually did all come together and join the school, or at least when they saw Sanctuary there. Some of the jokes are okay, especially like Kitty and Magic laughing at Emma, stuff like that. They've got all these little interaction scenes like Cyclops with his younger self, Cyclops with young Jean Grey. It's the kind of stuff that I wish was a little more partitioned across the series. It kind of feels like we're catching up to things that we should have already seen.
But I mean, like, it's not part of the writing style for this book. This stuff should have transpired in All New, but it seems like Bendis was just a little too anxious to jump right into this Trial of Jean Grey story arc instead of actually trying to lay down what's going on throughout his characters. I'm not going to bag on him for it, but, like, yeah, this should have been at least touched on before this issue.
And also maybe it would be a little harder to do with his single issue kind of arcs that he does in Uncanny to do it that way, but it still kind of feels like, you're just doing this now, and then, I mean, we only really get a little bit of it. I mean, Scott and Scott acknowledge that it's awkward, and, they joke about women's hair color, and Scott and Jean acknowledge that it's awkward, and the thing with the wedding invitation, that was kind of bittersweet. And, there's some great lines there, where Jean's like, well, Scott, you lived our relationship, but I can never imagine it happening. But it doesn't feel like there's really too much substance besides acknowledging that they did have to cross paths eventually.
I don't know. I thought it was actually kind of just bittersweet and short. I mean, like, honestly, I wouldn't want to have a whole arc with just them trying to catch up and be awkward together, you know what I mean? It really would have taken some wind out of the sails. But, like, maybe another issue of this, it may be in All New, would have been warranted instead of just trying to rush everything into the future, you know what I mean? But, the man's got a plan, and it seems to be working thus far, so I'm really not going to cite it on trivial character development.
So after we take this trip through Scott's mind and his memories, we catch back up to the present again, where once again it's noted that as renegades, they have no friends. So there's no one to help them try and catch up to their kidnapped students. They're just throwing out ideas, like maybe we can steal a spaceship and fly into Shi'ar space and get them. Which is kind of funny, because that was like literally Magneto's first thing, like taking over a cave citadel.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, you got to understand that, like, you're right. You always are. I should have realized it. But the whole thing that this is going to be something that's thrown back in Scott's face for years, that these kids were taken. And he doesn't know that most of them are with the Starjammers and the Guardians of the Galaxy. He thinks they're all caught up with the Shi'ar. So, I mean, he's got to be thinking the worst of the worst. So he's really in a tough place. So, I mean, this is a good point to actually draw some emotion out of the character that people have been seeing, thinking that he's gone, like, psychopathic. He's almost Patrick Bateman Cyclops at times. But, in this, you kind of really see that, like, he just bottles everything up now. And, like, this was very warranted. It's very, very good timing, in my opinion, for actually bringing out emotional elements in the character.
That does bring us around again, because the issue started with Scott just pounding the snow and freaking out. And the issue basically ends with that same mentality, where that frustration is just, boiling out of his eyes. It's just like, how could I have fucked up this so bad?
And there's nothing he can do about it at this point. I mean, like, honestly, the best thing that they have going is they can sneak into S.H.I.E.L.D. and steal a spaceship, which I don't think that they're actually going to be able to pull off. Or the solicitations, and, like, at the end of this book, you see the next cover is them going to war with S.H.I.E.L.D. So maybe, like, they try to get a spaceship, and that precipitates this big battle that they're going to have with S.H.I.E.L.D. We'll have to wait and read, but I'm not entirely sure that that's how it's going to transpire. I mean, Bendis has, like, this really convoluted style of writing this. I mean, like, I think he's been hanging out with Nick Spencer, been reading a lot of Morning Glories, because this book, like, revolves in a weird way and switches up between characters and ideals from issue to issue to try to keep you guessing what you're going to be reading about next. So, I mean, it's hard to predict what the next issue will be about.
Yeah, and they still have the Sentinels to feud with S.H.I.E.L.D. over. But I think they could pull off a spaceship. I mean, this would not even be like the second or third time in X-Men history. I mean, didn't they have to steal a spaceship in that Shi'ar arc with that Vulcan guy to go and confront him?
Right, yeah, when in the Brubaker series.
And then there was that time with Cable and X-Force where they had to go and steal a spaceship. And I'm sure Corsair, as a space pirate, has stolen many, many spaceships. So, I mean, come on, between Cyclops, Cable, Corsair, I think it runs in the family to steal spaceships. I've got confidence that he should be able to do it.
Yeah, and S.H.I.E.L.D., with all their pride and integrity, dude, they really are so easy to steal shit from, it seems.
Yeah, man. There's probably a spaceship right next to the beer room anyway.
Pow pow.
But, yeah, man, thumbs up or thumbs down, and buy it or skip it.
Oh, dude, thumbs up. I mean, on the art alone, I just love the vivid, visceral David Mack / J.H. Williams style that this book has. The way that the panels kind of swirl around each other and stuff. It's very, very intoxicating to look at. And it's a great little story. And buy it, because this is Uncanny X-Men. This is the book that you should be reading if you're an X-Men fan. And this issue is no slouch. This is important stuff. This is big stuff about Cyclops and Kitty Pryde since, she's come to the new Xavier school. So I don't see how you could pass this book up.
I've got to go thumbs up. I've always loved Cyclops' swirling I-beam effect ever since I first saw it. And this is a whole issue of it. So, how can I not love that? And I'm going to go with buy it. I didn't think it was the deepest issue as far as really getting into the characters, but Scott does get to make his case for what happened during AVX. And you can't damn Cyclops without at least giving him his chance to explain himself there. Next up is Magneto #1. Find threats to mutants and kill them. That's Magneto's new job.
Right, he's like the ex-Punisher, you know what I mean? He's got that black costume. And he's even, back down his operation. He doesn't float around and do stuff anymore. He's got, an old Bronco that he cruises around in, and he's got his methods and his means. This is such an interesting way to take the character, man.
Yeah, man. I'm sure everyone's saying it because it is such an obvious comparison, because it just is. He's like the Punisher for mutants, or kind of like a one-man X-Force. But, he targets specifically hate crimes against mutants. And he probably does, resemble Punisher more with, the all-black, and, he's got the van because, his powers, I guess, are not 100% back, and he even kind of has the line about, flying isn't always perfect. I could fly too far long distance and, have to fly back and be tired and shit. Which was kind of funny, I guess, but I kind of like how they showed it's well, hey, when you're a mile or two up in the air, you can't always make shit out perfect. Flying ain't always the easiest thing.
Right. Was it just me, or was his narration just awesome? It was almost Cy Spurrier style, that you really got into the context and the plight and the motivations of Magneto in this. And it's kind of brought him to life better than I've ever seen before. I really get him. I wouldn't want to say humanized him, because he's still the human-hating misanthrope that he's always been and we love, but you really just get into his feelings and what's going on. And I like the way he addresses, the things that he's been in the past, Magnus, and Max, Eric Linzer. He accepts all these things, he knows he's been all of them, and he embraces all of them to become this new version of Magneto that he really feels that there needs to be.
Yeah, man, he's got a healthy dose of respect and knowledge of Magneto's history. Like you said, he points it all out. Ruling island nations and king of the dinosaurs, all the different things Magneto's done over the past, and it gets almost a little too, noirish and dry at times. He's like, some people would say I've taken a big step down. Me, I say the coffee's not bad.
Right.
I don't know, it felt a little too hard-boiled to me for Magneto, but it's hardly even a con, really, just kind of a weird little nitpick, and I did kind of chuckle at it anyway, so I don't know, but yeah, he's living like the Punisher, moving from location to location, paying off the locals to not report anything suspicious.
Well, yeah, I really like that, especially at the beginning when he's in the hotel room and the maid comes by and gives him his newspapers, and he's a little worried at first that she's made him, but then, he just realized that, oh no, she's just a girl on her cell phone. She could be talking to anybody. I shouldn't wig out and try to kill her because, chances are she wouldn't even know who I am. Most people don't unless I got the helmet on. I was just right on, dude. That's awesome that he even, stepped himself back a notch, and was just yeah, I'll just let this goofy little girl go.
But he does also give her that, huge tip. It's kind of yeah, there's nothing to worry about here. But like you said, you don't really recognize him, or people don't really recognize him without the helmet. And that helmet is kind of the symbol of Magneto. And when Magneto needs to make a show, Magneto can make a show. Now, one of the other things I think they do really well here is not rely too heavily on the past either. We've had comics of Magneto hunting down Nazis before. So to fit with the whole, mutant hate crime thing they got going on, there's plenty of them to find. Even if you're not talking about, fighting the purifiers themselves, the science behind all that tech and all that shit they have, that's got to come from somewhere. And it's going to be Magneto's job to stop those people.
Right, even if he catches you at Starbucks, man, he's going to walk right up to your table, he's going to sit down, he's going to be very calm about it, he's going to talk to you about what he thinks you've done wrong, and if you throw him any attitude, he's going to rip your fillings out of your mouth right there in the Starbucks and then take you outside and stick signposts through your head, which is probably one of the most gory and gruesome scenes that I've seen in an X-book ever. I just loved it, man. I thought that was just so epic. That dude just, like, laying there in the street, kind of just, like, flopped over, but, like, being held up by the signposts that are going through his mouth and through the back of his head. I mean, like, that was just a terrific panel.
Yeah, man, that really felt like kind of pushing the bounds for X-Men. Like, once again, it feels like a Punisher X-Men book. So, I mean, Magneto knows how to not just kill someone, but to make a spectacle out of it. To say, you go down this path, this is the kind of shit that can end up happening to you. And then again, he's trying to track down a mutant murderer, who has been picked up by the police. So he's got to go into this police station now to get this guy, and he's like, well, fuck it. I gotta do what I gotta do. I can't just let him get away, and he's only going to be in the easy prison for so long. So he walks in, and they slowly, like, artistically through the little highlights, kind of show you all the little pieces of metal Magneto's picking up. And then he makes this big scene where he swoops in and blows everyone out and takes tiny little pieces of paperclip and belt buckle and constructs the classic Magneto helmet around his head, just kind of like piecemeal.
Such a neat scene, because, yeah, he comes in and almost like how in the show Sherlock with Benedict Cumberbatch, when he notices things, it's like he zooms in and he, like, notices every little piece of metal in the police station, and then he makes it all react at once just to cause this anarchistic scene. And then, yeah, he just forms this black and silver helmet around his head. I mean, it's just so badass.
Yeah, man. So Magneto's come here to kill this murderer, but it turns out Magneto's been duped. They kind of made like a cheapo Sentinel out of him. Like someone, abducted this guy, carved him up, and filled him with Sentinel parts, and, did God knows what to his brain to turn him into a killer. And then Magneto comes, and the Sentinel programming takes over, and it starts, like, wigging out and firing missiles and all this shit, and Magneto has to fight it. Again, I think a little bit of an idea of where Magneto's power levels are at, because he has a line where he talks about how he can move the metal, but he can't reshape it.
Right. And I mean, like, it really kind of was sad, because this kid, he's not a killer. He was just kind of a homeless kid these people took, and basically, whenever a mutant gets in his vicinity, he sentinels out and has to kill him, which is really horrible. And even Magneto sees that, like, even though this kid's a human, it's really barbaric what's been done to him, and he actually almost feels for this kid as well. This is, like, kind of the cliffhanger where he's really pissed about this, and he's going to go find out who the hell's doing this to poor unsuspecting homeless kids.
Yeah, so Magneto stumbled onto quite a dirty operation pretty quickly. I would have liked to have seen a little more of just, like, simple Magneto as the Punisher before they really got into, like higher up the ante kind of cases. I gotta wonder, though, maybe Magneto should have done shit like this in the first place. Maybe instead of, like, going full-on after all humanity, maybe if you just killed one human at a time, you could have slipped under Professor X's radar for a little while longer.
It's like I said, villains and their hubris, it's always their downfall. But now that he sees the light, and, like, I guess because he probably couldn't take on all of humanity in his kind of weakened state, that, like, he's actually kind of found a calling that makes more sense than anything he's ever done before.
Yeah, man, which makes the visual art really work for this, because it is like the shine has dimmed a little bit on Magneto. I'm not going to say that, like, the hubris is completely gone, but, all the show and the spectacle, I mean, he still does some of these things, but he doesn't have these, like, kingly aspirations. He's just doing whatever he thinks it takes now.
And I'm so happy you brought up the art, because I was going to touch on this myself. I love that it looks like an Oni Press comic. It's got that indie-style art. It's not just that they got Colin Bunn to write this comic. It's like they're going out of their way to make it actually look completely like a Colin Bunn comic. I was really just taken back by that. That was really cool.
See, man, I guess in the past, he kind of became an anti-villain. Like, he was a bad guy, but he was the kind of bad guy you could be sympathetic towards, especially as they built up the Holocaust history and all that, and made him a little less mustache twirling and a little more, like, just misguided. And then especially as they kind of, they had Xavier and his X-Men at one extreme and, like, Magneto and his Brotherhood on the other. But, over the decades, they've brought them closer and closer and closer to each other. To the point where I think Magneto, I mean, now he looks like he really is just a classic anti-hero. Like Wolverine, or like the Punisher, who we've mentioned like 100 times already. He's like a good guy, but with bad methods. As opposed to like a bad guy with methods,
Right. I mean, like, even when he was a villain, I kind of saw his ideals more than personally Xavier's. I'm the kind of guy that if I was a mutant, I wouldn't give a shit about humans, like they just want to throw shit at me and kill me. I'd have been a Magneto was right kind of mutant anyways. So I mean, like, that he's more kind of accepting of humanity, but still doesn't really like us too much. But like, at least he understands that we're not all bad, This kind of, like you said, anti-hero Magneto is just such a great evolution of the character, man. Like, this is so awesome that this is happening finally for Eric.
But yeah, man, I guess all the books just have to go dark now. That's like what works. Renegade Cyclops, Black Magneto, and what we'll see with Wolverine and the X-Men later almost a little bit. But before we get to that, on this one, thumbs up or thumbs down, and buy it or skip it?
A thumbs up, dude. I mean, I was expecting a doozy from this book, but I wasn't expecting it to be this brutal. And buy it, man. This is shaping up to be one hell of a interesting look into the psyche of Magneto.
I'll go thumbs up. They've painted this new situation pretty well. And I'll go buy it. They throw a couple really cool concepts at you and establish them really well visually as well. Okay, so next up is Wolverine and the X-Men #1. With a scrawl that starts with the infamous No More Phoenix line of AVX, but then also promises the future of Quire as Phoenix. So, I guess they have to mention that to tell you that they're revisiting the idea and changing it. But if I was like reading this for the first time as a #1 issue, I'd be like, what? And I mean, maybe it's just the characters, but it still seems pretty much every bit as goofy as when we left off. I mean, maybe you just can't help but look silly when you've got, Eye-Boy and shit like that in your book. And even when you've got Wolverine's Archies like running through boot camp drills and shit, it even just looks like in this really silly kind of way.
I don't know. I actually thought that this book bulked up quite a bit. I think that it's really picked up some steam, and I like that they're actually kind of, I don't know, look like they're actually going to be taking this comic book forward as like maybe a team of X-Men that are going to be fighting in the near future. I really like that he's pulled up some of my favorites from the back, like you get to see Helion and Prodigy from the old new X-Men comics, kind of back to their old things, their odd rivalry, which was kind of really good to see revisited again. I really like this new student, the Chinese girl with antlers. She reminded me a lot of Gus from Sweet Tooth. I got a really good feeling out of this first issue. It seemed to actually be heading towards something better than just them having rocket-packed silly adventures, even though there is a touch of that still in this comic.
Well, it seems like what they're basically doing is having the school mirror where Wolverine's at. I guess he's kind of like reacting scared, and that's what his character arc is doing, so he's doing the same thing with his school. Now he's got his kids running some military drills, like crawling under fake barbed wire while the one girl shoots fire at it or whatever.
Yeah, Hisako's got the flamethrower going. What was it? Squirmer sizzle meat. Squirmer sizzle. I don't know. It was a bit silly, but I don't know. At least it seems to be going somewhere besides them just doing the same thing issue in and issue out that Aaron had the Archies doing. And I really like the fact that, Quentin Quire sees that, like, he's going to have to grow up, and he rebels against it in this issue. And, like, he does that stupid thing where he has Rockslide try to squish the Bamps. Rockslide goes and starts tearing up the school and stuff like that. Ends up running into the little cute Chinese girl with the antlers, and, like, that kind of comes to a head, and Storm ends up yelling at Quentin Quire, and you get a bit of a revelation of how he's terrified that, he's going to become this hero and, like, this X-Men stuff when he wasn't ever asked to be. And yeah, I mean, like, it's very CW, nighttime, Wednesday night show version of the X-Men, but, it seems to be a lot better than, Sunday morning cartoon Wolverine and the X-Men was with Jason Aaron's run.
And most of this issue is about setting that stage for how they think the series is going to go. Which, I mean, come on, really, it might as well just be a new arc. They even start with a flash forward to the Battle of the Atom Future, which they just did in the previous issue as well.
Right, I mean, that's the only real difference here is it's got a different creative team. I don't know, they kind of seem to be moving the school along in a weird idealism with Wolverine. He needs to try to find some more hardcore teachers. I mean, sure, it's silly compared to, like, what's going on in X-Force, but as what's gone on previously in Wolverine and the X-Men, this was hardcore. This was hard-hitting and very innovative, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, man, Wolverine killed a guy. He's fighting in this prison set up for denizens of the world, partially because he needs to go and convince Phantom X to come with him. I mean, how this lines up with X-Force, I have no idea, but whatever. He does have the scar. He's got the killable scar on his eye, and he's also wearing his patch identity for some reason. But yeah, he fights like, I don't know, it looks like an Azazel type creature or something, and it's kind of off panel a little bit, but I mean, Wolverine does get his kill on.
Yeah, I mean, like, and he pretty much lays it out pretty hardcore. A little bit of a plus, too. I mean, like, I was really hesitant for this new series, but I gotta say, man, I really like this new writer. I like that he understands that there's other young people at the Jean Grey School besides Quentin Quire and Idie. I'm really glad that we got to see Armor and Rockslide and Helion and other young X-Men that I really like better than the people that have just been shoved in my face throughout the tenure of Wolverine and the Archies.
And I suppose the series is still going to be about the kids. I guess apparently some different kids and some more focusing on more of the grown-up ones, I guess. So I'm not sure how much like the Wolverine part matters to it, but it seems like becoming killable has just like brought Wolverine around to Cyclops' thinking now. He's like, I need killers at my school, and I need Phantom X, and I need my kids to be able to run through mud puddles and shit.
Well, it was him becoming killable, and I think that, like, when they had the stupid beer drinking thing, I think 3 issues before the last issue of Wolverine and the Archies with Jason Aaron, I think that Jason Aaron was really horrible at expressing it, but I think that Wolverine kind of saw, Cyclops' idealism just a touch, enough to, like, kind of realize that he needs a little bit of that himself with his kids.
Yeah, but I might have to go look at that one again, because, I mean, I didn't really get that at all, but yeah, I mean, so maybe...
Well, I didn't get it at all in that issue either, but, I mean, it would make sense if they kind of try to pull that out, in an issue or two, that, like, that's why Wolverine's going this stance, is like, yeah, he had it out with Cyclops, they got drunk, and they kind of saw each other's perspective a bit, even though, like, Jason Aaron didn't allude to that, or maybe he's just not a good enough writer to put something like that in his book, but... yeah, I mean, I think that that's kind of what's going on here at Touch.
Alright, man, so you feeling thumbs up or thumbs down and buy it or skip it?
I gotta give this a thumbs up. This one issue was better than the entire run of Jason Aaron's Wolverine and the X-Men. I really like some of the more mature themes that they're playing with that's going to be going forward on this book. But I'm going to have to go ahead and say skip it now. I don't want to sell you on something that might end up just sucking ass in the near future.
I'm going to go thumbs down. I think they actually found a way to make Wolverine and the X-Men worse. I mean, at least the old series kind of had, like, its charm of being what it is. But this just seems to be trying to turn around the other way. I mean, everything is portrayed kind of how they want it to be, with the inmates running the asylum, the schools going into chaos, Quire's a proctor or a praetor or what you call them now. So I guess they portrayed it well, but it just seems like it's lost what it had and is not becoming anything else except for a mess, and I blame Killable completely. And I'm going to go skip it because it's an establishing issue for a series that was already established. I mean, maybe they have to kind of try and set what they think their new tone is, but still over the course of doing that, aside from showing us this crazy Phoenix symbol broadcast all over the world at the end of the issue, nothing happens. Next up is Night of Living Deadpool number 4. So Deadpool discovered that the zombie plague in this miniseries is connected to AIM experiments on his healing factor, and takes the reanimated head of an AIM scientist to an AIM facility with him, hoping to cure it. It doesn't go well, and when he gets overwhelmed by zombies, he figures, oh well, what the hell, drinks a jar of the experimental healing factor formula, and lets zombies eat him. This mutates the virus into a Deadpool virus, turning every zombie that passes it along into another Deadpool. Johnny, thoughts on Night of Living Deadpool number 4, the end of the series?
I thought it was almost a clever end, I mean, it wasn't your normal zombie, everybody dies type of thing, and it wasn't your normal, they find a cure type thing, and it was, very Danny Way style Deadpool silly. I really liked a lot of the stuff in it, like when he was talking to the scientist's head all the time, and he ended up using it as a weapon and a flashlight holder. I mean, there was several things that, like, really made this probably the best issue of this 4-shot. I mean, honestly, but for the most part, it's just kind of like, really, did we need 4 issues of this? I mean, I really think that they could have did it in 2, or in, maybe, like you said, an original graphic novel, type of setting.
I've been waiting for this one to wrap up so I could do, like, our final say on it. And as far as for me, I feel like, something like this isn't really about the plot. It's for Deadpool jokes and zombie references. And they kind of try to give it a bit of a plot anyway in the end here in these past 2 issues. The idea of a zombie virus based on Deadpool's regeneration power and out-of-control experiments, it makes enough sense. And at the end of it, effectively becomes immortal by spreading his body and consciousness through Deadpool zombies all over the world. So once again, it's clever for that gimmick, but as far as the story, I feel like they kind of half-assed it. I mean, maybe if they had started this earlier, it might have become more than just a gimmick of the idea. But they're kind of half in, half out as far as trying to give it plot, which didn't really work for me. They referenced Dugan and Posehn.
Oh yeah, with the Cheerio eating contest or something like that, and really feel the heat. That was a clever little joke, and like they really did punch up Deadpool's humor in this one. There was more laughs and better jokes than probably the past 3 issues have had altogether, and the violence and the art was kind of, I don't know, a little more over the top and a little fun. So I mean, like, this was a decent enough end to it. I mean, it's just a bad cliche from the get-go.
Yeah, and I guess my final kind of thought is that I just don't really think it rose above that much either. So, thumbs up or thumbs down, and buy it or skip it?
I have the entire time. I'm going to give it a mediocre thumbs up for what they were trying to do and what it was. It's fun, and I mean, like, if you don't try to get too attached or you don't expect something, like, amazing out of it, this will be fun for you. To get the trade, I mean, it's a goofy, cliched exploitation of, people like zombies, people like Deadpool. And it's not a horrible read. So, I mean, yeah, the trade will be fine.
Yeah, it's not awful, but I'm going to go thumbs down. I'm just not feeling it. I'm going to go skip it. Unless you really do devour, like, everything zombie and it amuses you to no end to point out things like, hey, that's a reference. Haha, hey, look, there's a reference. Like, other than that, I just don't think there's really enough here. On to the previews. First up is All New X Factor number 4.
Yes.
Yeah, so Danger's gonna join the team, but first they have to duke it out. Because, I mean, superheroes, that's how it goes.
Right, you gotta show them that, like, we're on your side through a nice fist fight. That always seems to be the case with the X teams, you know what I mean? You really gotta find out that you're friends with somebody after you guys just kick the shit out of each other. I mean, that's just, like, and that's how kind of I've made some of my best friends in life, too, Like, most of my best friends, I ended up enemies with when I first met them, so... I guess that's probably why I feel so at home when I read these kind of stories.
Life imitating art, or art imitating life? I think it's also kind of funny. I joked before about how that one issue, I think it was issue 2, getting to the secret room with the scientists felt like kind of a danger room exercise with little trapdoors and shit like that. And now they have real danger to fight.
Right. So, I mean, it's come full circle in just 4 issues. Is Peter David a genius? I think so.
Yeah, man, yeah. And, I mean, just even looking over some of this again, it reminds me how great each issue was. It's just been boom, 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 good shit, references the past, but keeps itself new, and I just really look forward to every issue. We're also going to get All New X-Men number 24. It's the second to last issue, penultimate issue, if you will, of the trial of Jean Grey. I wonder who's going to wake up in the beginning.
Well, I think that this is going to be probably, like, another really good issue. The All New X-Men issues are really, really good in this arc. And then the Guardians of the Galaxies are the ones we're meh about. So I think that we're going to get some good action. We're going to get some good jokes and stuff in this one. And then the last issue is going to be the kind of, like, meh issue again.
That sucks, man. I don't want the trial to have to end on a downer note.
Oh, no. I mean, I don't mean it like that. I just was saying that it seems to be oddly that way. The 4 that we've read so far, really like both of the All New X-Men books. But the Guardians editions were just kind of like, they were good. They kind of brought the story, but didn't really hammer it in too well. So, I mean, I really think that this issue is going to be like that. I think it's going to be cool. And we're just going to get a lot of fight in the last issue of Guardians of the Galaxy. So,
well, I don't think I'd be completely opposed to that. But, I mean, seriously, someone's got to be, like, knocked out and wake up in the beginning, right? Like, maybe Jean falls asleep at her own trial in the bubble and wakes up when they ask her to plead guilty or not guilty.
Or no, like she gets woken up and told that she's got to come back to the courtroom type of thing. Her lawyer comes and gets her. I can see that. Or, why not just have Cyclops wake up again? He seems to be a sleepyhead in this series so far. Every time it's him waking up. So.
Yeah, they've got to start the issue with, Psych, wake up, we're here.
I gotta tell you, man, it's air flight. I'm the same way, man. You get me up in an airplane, I sit still for a couple of minutes, and I just...
All right, well, Johnny, Psych, both you guys, wake up. We're in Shi'ar space. We gotta go rescue Jean.
Pow, pow.
Okay, so something I thought was kind of worth noting, or at least kind of confused me. Reading the preview pages, they mention, or actually, no, do you remember in, I think it was All New 22, when they're having the conversation between Angel and the Sandwich, Cyclops and young Jean. Jean references her whole family dying.
Okay, so they're gonna revisit the end of Greys when the Shi'ar Empire just showed up and just obliterated an entire house full of generations of a family.
Yeah, I'm looking at the preview pages here, and they mention the end of the Greys, and I see Jean in her bubble. It looks like it's Jean saying, "Is it true?" I mean, I thought she already knew from All New X-Men 22.
Well, I don't think so, man, because it's always been very awkward between her and Rachel, and they never actually got to talk before they left the Jean Grey school, so maybe she hasn't learned about that yet. Because she didn't know who the hell the Shi'ar were when they first showed up either. If she knew what happened in Grey, she'd have known who the hell they are.
So maybe she just knows that her parents aren't around, and she doesn't know about the whole thing? Because, I mean, when she says, my whole family dying, I'm dealing with it, like, it seems to, like, say that she knows about the end of Grey. She knows her whole family is dead.
Well, maybe that they did tell her that something happened, but I don't think that they explained to her that a bunch of aliens came down and just decided to pull an entire genocide on your genealogical line. Maybe they didn't, like, give her every single detail of what happened, and, like, definitely, like I said, her and Rachel never kind of sat down and hashed anything out. They just always had them awkward moments in the hallway where they both turn around and, like, okay, we're not ready to talk yet type of thing, which I think is probably detrimental because, like, she could have probably laid this all down for Jean in the past.
Especially if she goes and massacres the whole Shi'ar and becomes the Phoenix anyway, because she's so pissed that they killed her family.
This is also all just breeding this new Jean Grey to kind of just become a villain, to make Madeline Pryor look like nothing, you know what I mean? Like, she wasn't shit compared to, like, what a real evil Jean Grey could be like.
Yeah, man, Sisterhood's gonna be trying to resurrect her next. Like, fuck resurrecting Madeline Pryor. Let's just go find that future Jean Grey Zorn girl. Alright, so we're also gonna get Deadpool 25 Point Now. So, tell me how the end of an arc is a jump-on issue? The solicit's joke about celebrating 25 as a landmark issue.
At least somebody else is, like, pissed about that and joking about that like you do, man. So, like, right on. I bet you, like, that's Fichon's, like, idea, you know? Like, yeah, we're just gonna be like, hey, look, we got a comic book that went 25 issues. Be surprised, you know? This is something for Marvel these days.
Well, it kind of reminds me of back in the day, too. Like, I remember, like, every 25th issue used to be kind of a big deal. 25, 50, 75, 100. You'd usually get, like, a little bit of an oversized comic or like a hologram card on the cover or something like that. Like,
okay,
there was
you're
usually,
talking
like,
about, like,
thing.
back in the 80s and 90s. Okay, I got you. Like, way back in the day they used to do that.
Yeah, man, yeah, I liked those days. So, making fun of them maybe makes me madder. I don't know, but at least the idea of this 25 being something a little special, even if it's that point now thing that I've been harping on so much, maybe I'll give them a bit of a pass here, even though they're kind of mocking it just because it's making something out of a 25, and it's nostalgic for me.
They're going to have the big number 1 on the right-hand corner like you love, dude.
Yeah, my big number 1, and at least they're going to make a joke about it.
It's Deadpool. It's this series of Deadpool, so, I mean, like, this issue is going to be awesome. I'm just going to go ahead and predict that now.
Yeah, man, we're going to get Deadpool versus Crossbones, the end of Gorman, maybe, and we can find out what's up with Preston and Deadpool's head. I mean, there's a lot to look forward to.
Yep.
We've also got Wolverine number 3.
Oh, man, they need to put this book monthly, man. I can't be reading this 2 times a month. It's going to do damage to my health.
Well, I think it's almost kind of a good thing, man. The more of this we get over, the better.
Yeah, I mean, like, such an original name for an arc, too. Rogue Logan. It's just like, wow. I wonder how long it took Cornell to think that up. But I mean, like, honestly, you're right, dude, because, like, in September, we're getting a whole new relaunch anyway. So, yeah, just go ahead and just run through this as fast as you can, you know? Like, I don't even understand why we're having to read this, because it's all just going to be redone again at the end of the year. So, man, whatever, you know?
Yeah, man. So, I mean, maybe once they get through, like, 4 arcs, there'll be, like, one good idea out of it. But, I mean, it's probably just stalling until the next event, like you just said, that we also talked about before. But, I mean, at least we find out quicker. I mean, Jubilee shows up. That's got to be worth something.
Right on. Yeah, I like Jubilee, but I mean, Paul Cornell, he tries to stick his fingers in all everybody's pies, like him involving Storm and Kitty, you know, and having Storm drop that note off at the Xavier school in the last issue. That just pissed me off so bad. Now he's gonna stick his little finger in Brian Wood's book, and I'm like, dude, keep your fingers in your own shitty ass series, man. Leave the good comics alone.
Yeah, man, because this guy shits a lot, and I doubt he washes his hands. Oh, well, at least we also get X-Force number 2.
Yeah. which, I mean, I've been dying to read for weeks now. So, yeah, dude, just can't wait. Can't get this issue soon enough.
Yeah, man. So issue 1, we got the premise. The premise is set. Now we're going to just dive into it. How does being a mutant black ops leader work? Especially when it's this political, I guess you got to have connections. You know, unlike his father's renegade group. So we're at least going to get a glimpse of how connected Cable is.
And not to mention, I really want to see, like, where this leaves them, because, like, they just crashed a plane. They're kind of on unfriendly grounds right now. So, I mean, like, there's probably going to be some cool battle going on in the beginning of this. I don't know, probably some cool deaths and like, that manga-style art that Rock Kim does. So I can't wait to read it.
Yeah, man, I'm definitely glad they're sticking with the signature art style for now. So the last book to preview is X-Men Legacy number 300. What? X-Men Legacy 300? Really? Go to hell, Marvel. Come on, you really have to have it both ways. You get to renumber X-Men Legacy as many times as you want, and then keep bringing it back every time you think it's going to be an anniversary issue.
Who's going to be the focus of the book now? I don't give a shit about the numbering. I don't even care about like who the book's going to be about and who's writing it and stuff, man. I don't. You and your numbering issues, man, like that's crazy. You know, like that's between you and your calculator, man. I only care about like what's inside the book.
It's cheating, man. It's cheating. They keep renumbering and selling number ones, but like, oh, we want to have our 300 too. It's like, is DC gonna renumber Action Comics when it hits 1,000, or would have hit 1,000, even though they rebooted their universe?
Who cares? It's DC, man.
Yeah, I mean, at least the issue is going to be written by Mike Carey, Christos Gage, and Cy Spurrier.
Oh, snap. So, yeah, we got three of the guys that actually made X-Men Legacy the book that it is, revisiting and writing on this issue. So, I mean, like, that's enough to make you get over the damn numbering, man. Come on.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely something to look forward to. I don't know if it's going to be like a compilation story, or if it's going to be kind of like X-Men Gold and stuff, where they each tell little bits of different story. But yeah, man, so it's something, and I'm not even sure if the book's going to continue yet. Because I thought it was going to be about Nightcrawler, but now I think they're just calling the Nightcrawler series Nightcrawler.
Yeah, there was like that pull-out poster in the Moon Knight comic, and like, yeah, Nightcrawler's just going to have his own number one in his own series by Claremont.
Alright, so, yeah, let's ditch all the whining from me about numbering issues, and just go ahead and spike the punch.
Yeah, man, spike it up.
Oh, yeah!
Spiking the Punch is a segment where Johnny and I each bring up one non-X-Men related comic. And Johnny Alpha, you're ready to lead us off.
Oh, hell yeah, man. And I'm going to be spiking with the Marvel book. I'm going to be going with Moon Knight number 1. And I just got to start this off and say that I have to admit that I love Warren Ellis. He is by far my favorite comic book writer. So when I found out that he would be writing one of my all-time favorite heroes ever, Moon Knight, this was bound to be a comic I would die to read. It looks to be pure Ellis gold, man. It's in the vein of Desolation Jones mixed with Fell, with maybe a touch of Lazarus Churchyard in there, just for equal measure. Okay, so in this first issue, we find Mark Spector, Moon Knight. He's returned to New York from a brief stint of trying to be a hero in LA because he kind of thought that like everybody was fighting in New York, so he tried to be a West Coast hero. Didn't work out too well for him. But with a fresh new perspective on himself and his powers, along with a bit of a handle on the mental problems that have plagued him in the recent past, he's really kind of just turned over a new leaf. His new approach at crime fighting finds him working with the police detectives at almost like a Sherlock Holmes-style, consulting detective-style gig with the New York Police Department. In this first case, we find him dealing with a slasher that's killing well-built men like bodybuilders and stuff, and he's like taking parts of their bodies, and the police are stumped to know why. So Mooney follows the clues, and he goes deep underground under New York because there's just tunnels and subways and just miles and miles of stuff down there, to where he eventually finds the killer, this kind of dishonored and forgot about SHIELD soldier that was shot and kind of just left to die. So he's killing these people, and he's taking their body parts to try to make this kind of Frankenstein version of himself, which is so very Warren Ellis, man. He's always been into like that cyberpunk style body modification, taking other stuff and like trying to make it a part of yourself. This was pure Warren Ellis style. All this body modification, it ends up being for nothing for this guy, because Moon Knight is able to turn his anger and his power against himself, and he takes him out without even using any at all physical brutality, which like is really, if you know Moon Knight, is really him turning over a new leaf. I mean, he has always been just a supreme violent, cut a crescent moon shape in your forehead after he's done with you kind of vigilante. So the fact that he took this guy out without actually having to actually hurt him personally was really kind of a cool, clever role reversal for the hero. But also in this comic, we learn that after L.A., Mark Spector seeks out some psychiatric help, and in doing so, he really learns some things about himself and his powers. We learn that he isn't really crazy, and he doesn't actually have multiple personality disorder. Basically, the four aspects are his four powers. There's the Pathfinder, the Embracer, the Defender, and the Watcher over Night Travelers. He's never been schizophrenic like people thought he was. The whole idea of him having Jake Lockley, who is the Pathfinder, as the cab driver that goes out and finds stuff during the day for him to go and fight, and Stephen Grant, the Embracer, the guy that was the millionaire who helped him, was his personality that made it able for him to do what he had to do, and Mark Spector, who he really is, who is the Defender. And then on top of that, he had Moon Knight, who is the Watcher over Nighttime Travelers. These needed to be part of him, because there's the four different aspects of the god, which also kind of plays into what Bendis did with him, where he kind of replaced those personalities with Wolverine, who was the Pathfinder, Spider-Man, who was the Embracer, Captain America, who was the Defender, and Moon Knight, who was the protector of Nighttime Travelers. So, I mean, Warren Ellis has found this really kind of interesting and amazing way to take what we've read about Moon Knight, all these incarnations of him in the past, compress it, suppress it, and make it into some kind of odd little mythology to use what we've had before as a springboard to carry this character into the future. Instead of retconning, we're using what we've had in the past in a different manner to really bring this character about in a way that it's actually going to be beneficial to him as a person to move forward at actually being a hero, which I just got to love him for. And then there's one other note that I'd like to touch on, which is his outfit. I know you and me kind of had this out before, but I got to say, I really like the old flowing cape and stuff, but the plain white, the blazing white business suit, it really fits with this noir detective motif he's going for, and it's rather reminiscent to Warren Ellis' comic Planetary and the character Elijah Snow, so it was kind of a very reminiscent and welcome look, in my opinion, for the new Moon Knight.
Couldn't understand a lot of that better myself, man. I mean, for Warren Ellis to do what he was going to want to do, I mean, he was going to have to kind of massage the character a little bit to kind of, get it to work his way a little bit. But he did a really good job of it. Like you said, it's not really a complete retcon so much as just taking this mythology of the moon god and making it work in his favor. And I thought that was a stroke of brilliance, too. It's like, no, man, you're not diseased. I mean, this is just what happens when you get occupied by a supernatural force.
This is the kind of character that Warren Ellis always excels at, man. Ever since his first book, Lazarus Churchyard, and then so on with Desolation Jones and Dr. Sleepless. I mean, he really takes these kind of broken, almost homicidal, schizophrenic characters and really just kind of makes them more human and more humane than even the Vestal Virgin hero of the day, Captain America type heroes, which really makes Warren Ellis my favorite writer.
And Moon Knight's not too bad of a choice of character to do that kind of shit with. Especially because, when his power is literally dying and coming back to life anyway. And I figure you die and you come back to life, I'm not saying you're a clean slate every time, but you die and come back to life, in and of itself has to buy you a little bit of wiggle room.
I mean, and not to mention, this follows along with the awesomeness that Marvel's been doing. This is another number one that just completely sets up, has a great, innovative story that wraps up in the first issue, but kind of sets up the series for more. But, it's not going to be a dragged on thing with this case. He goes and finds this one guy, and this first case is completely taken care of in the first issue, which I gotta just say, I'm such a huge fan that they are doing this now with a lot of these new Marvel comics.
Even if you prefer the old suit like I do, just as being part of the character design, the rotating personalities, I'm pretty sure you're going to see a little bit of everything. Even if Ellis prefers to use, the suited personality more often, it's kind of hard to be mad at anyone that looks that fucking pimp in a self-controlled limo.
Right.
And he just looks so fucking smooth back there, just chilling, man. The fact that the car drives itself was just a little bit of a cherry on the cake. Is that a phrase? Cherry on the cake? Cherry on the pie? Cherry on top?
Cherry on top, yeah.
I'm getting confused about fruit. But, anyway, I actually thought he looked a little bit more like Nemesis to me.
Nemesis by Mark Millar? Yeah, a touch, but I don't know. I wouldn't think that like Ellis would be giving nods to Millar. I think he'd be like, yeah, he's gonna throw in a little bit of recognition to us planetary fans of his, and like, yeah, we're gonna make Mooney look like Elijah Snow a touch.
Or maybe I'm just thinking that because my contribution to Spike the Punch this week is Starlight #1 from Mark Millar. Starlight #1 tells the story of an old man who we first meet at a funeral. It's his loving wife's funeral, and the whole setup for this whole thing is just really sad. He's lost his wife, he's lost his best friend. It's this whole awkward thing, it's like he kind of even doesn't want to be at the funeral, and the funeral just seems awkward and not right to him, and for some reason, like, his granddaughter tries to do, like, a sorry for your loss kind of thing, and her mother, like, shushes her, which I thought was weird, but it's just this really depressing introduction, and the guy's kids, they don't even really give a shit about him, kind of fighting over who might get stuck with him, if it comes to the point of him being so old he'd, like, have to go into a home or need some kind of care, but, I mean, the guy's still got some strength, he's still walking on his own, and it gets to the point where it's the 1-year anniversary of the mother and the wife's death, and they're all supposed to meet and have, like this family dinner kind of thing, so they never see each other anyway, and both the sons just totally blow it, like they get the date wrong, or they're somewhere else, or the one son, he's at work and doesn't even look at his phone, he even says, oh, it's no one important, it's just my dad, completely forgetting the whole thing, the dad is like, oh yeah, I didn't care. Meanwhile, the panels zoom back and you see he's got an entire table with tablecloths and wine bottles and everything all set and decorated. It just tugs at your heartstrings for this poor old guy, like, the whole issue. Now, the premise of the story, which I already knew going in, but if you didn't, is that it's about an old superhero who gets pulled back into action. One of the combination kind of things I heard was that it's like Buzz Lightyear meets Unforgiven. Because, originally this guy, he lived a space adventure. He was an astronaut who had gotten lost on a mission and washed up on this alien world. It was like a swashbuckling adventure, like a Flash Gordon, kind of thing, where fight the bad guy and save the day and put down the evil dictator, and they build statues in his honor and throw him parades. But non-traditional superhero story twist, this guy comes back to Earth eventually, because he wants to be with his wife, and he leaves all this fame behind, but everyone thinks he's like Looney Tunes. Like, they think he's crazy, they think he's full of shit. And he's, like, discredited from NASA, and it all kind of goes downhill from there again. At the very end of the issue, we see a spaceship uncloaked. They've come back, and they need him for one more adventure.
Right. I think that description you used was a bit off. I'd say that this kind of reminds me of a more action-packed version of 2 other Disney films. It reminds me of, like, with the old guy losing his wife and everything. It reminds me of that animated movie Up, mixed with John Carter. That's kind of a really cool mix-up, and I didn't really find it that sad. I think that they kind of really needed to explain that this guy's lost all of his anchors to his human world, that he's actually going to go back and be the hero he always should have been in the sci-fi world that he left behind to go be with his wife, which, now that she's no longer there for, he can go and be this, the Queen of Space's hero, and, the badass that he probably left behind. It was sad for him, but it was a little happy for him when the aliens came back and got him, because, now he gets to have the one last hoorah,
Man, I literally have that in my notes. It's like John Carter meets Up.
Did you really?
Yeah.
We got some synchronicity between the two of us, man, that's for sure.
But I really like your point on that these things kind of all need to happen to set up your premise. Like, if you want your premise to be retired superhero returns to action and to kind of have, be this way with the alien worlds and all that, he would have to lose all his anchors. He would have to not really have anything to worry about leaving behind. People say that Up is like one of the most beautiful love stories told in 5 minutes, or like, however long that opening montage thing was. And I think that this issue of Starlight, like, I think it was pretty much kind of like on that level of Up, of just like, telling so much story with so little.
Well, especially the few flashbacks with him and his wife. Like when they're in the restaurant and they pay for the young lovers' dinner just because it reminded her of how they were. You really realize that, like, he did have something special. You kind of got why he quit being that hero for that time. But now that he doesn't have that anymore, it's good that this poor old guy that's, he's mocked by children at the grocery store because, he told the truth about what happened to him when he got lost in space. He's going to get to go back and be that hero once more. He's not just going to die in a retirement home with a bunch of shitty kids that don't care about him.
If you knew the premise of this story going in, I mean, there really isn't much beyond that. In fact, they haven't even really fully set up the premise yet. Which is good for me, because I almost complained about Magneto going too fast. So I can't complain here about this one going too slow. It's just with Mark Miller, I mean, you don't know when the next one's coming out.
Right, yeah, he is rather slow with the output. And I mean, this is coming out of Image, people, so don't get too preoccupied with this is going to be on any kind of time scale that you're used to. The issues will come out when they come out.
I mean, I like a lot of his stuff from, outside Big Two. When he writes other heroes, it's been, I think, more missed than hit for me. I don't know about you, Johnny, but, his original stuff, I think, is more really good.
It's the way he's always been. I mean, even when he was at 2000 AD, Cannon Fodder and Red Razors was so much superior to his writing of Judge Dredd. So, I mean, I can almost say the same thing about Warren Ellis. I mean, I was a little apprehensive about him taking on Moon Knight because when he writes, other heroes, like when he did Fantastic Four and he did a short thing on Astonishing X-Men, it was well written, it was an X-Men story, but it didn't have that Warren Ellis flair that I was hoping for in there. So Miller, he kind of follows in that same suit, you know what I mean? They're kind of just I don't really dig this too much, but it's a paycheck, so here's a good story, but don't expect any of my normal flair to it.
But what he's doing here, of course, is he's setting up the whole Miller World shared universe. He's trying to build his whole new franchise now. MPH is going to be coming out of Kick-Ass, and then there's this, and then I think he's got eventually a total of maybe 9 titles planned, but he's just going to slowly roll them out. I mean, you said, kind of on his time. Just faster, as slow as they come, just kind of depends on how he's feeling, I guess. But, I mean, he's got comics that are going to be coming out as movies again soon. He's trying to build his own universe, so there's a lot of momentum for it, at least.
Matt Vaughn's doing his comic Secret Service right now into a film, so he's definitely still got the viable, optionable film franchises that are coming out at Icon. But it seems like he's really trying to pull away from Big Two, and he really seems like he's embracing this home that he has at Image with this Miller World. He's wrapping up Kick-Ass, this is going to be the last Kick-Ass ever, and I think that he's really going to be distancing himself from where he's just going to be doing these creator-owned, creator-controlled characters now, which, I think that some of these guys, especially these British writers like him, Ennis, Ellis, Morrison, they really excel at better than just writing, normal, just, heroes that they just get put on.
And Starlight #1 is the beginning of that. I mean, we'll see how far this shared universe idea takes off for him, but pick up the first one. I mean, you're right there from the beginning and totally get it later. So that's a big part of why I chose to spike the punch this week with Starlight #1. All right, and we'll put psn-radio.com down as the sponsor on that one.
PSN Radio, the best in talk radio anywhere.
And then we'll end the show this week with, I don't know, what do you got? How about a sexiest moment?
Oh, my.
Yeah, oh, my.
Johnny Alpha, what do you got for me?
And my sexiest moment is Magic. The way she just matter-of-factly leaves Kitty Pryde there with Cyclops. Her spunkiness, her attitude, just the matter-of-factness that she did it, makes Magic the sexiest thing I saw in X-Men comics this week.
Yeah, man, you gotta love that assuredness and confidence in a woman. Especially for one that looks as good as Magic. Me, I'm taking my sexiest moment from Wolverine and the X-Men #1. I've got to go with one of the very first things you see, Future Ide. Maybe a graveyard isn't the most likely place for a sexiest type moment to come from, but I don't know, man, just that first thing you see is her perfectly framed in this shot, and her breasts just look amazing in it, man. What's that old line from City? It's she grew up, she filled out. Okay, and we'll give the sexiest moment sponsorship this week to comicbook.com.
Hey man, this is Kevin Smith, and you've been comic booked.
Don't forget that our social media home is facebook.com/allaboutxmencomics podcast. Thank you for listening, and see you next time you decide to press play.